future is going to be better than the present, then you lose hope.
Totally.
And it's important to have that spirit of adventure.
Yeah, and I think also if people lose hope in the future, or if they have, if they're pessimistic about the future, then they're also unlikely to have kids, in which case you get the civilizational decline.
Mm-hmm.
We just have, for most of Earth, demographic collapse. Like the birth rates were crazy low.
Yeah.
So we're certainly, I think, not expanding, and we're really going to contract pretty significantly. Japan last year had twice as many deaths as births.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So,
every single Western country has a below replacement birth rate.
Yeah, and just generally the trend is, as soon as you get sort of urbanization, frankly, and unfortunately, education urbanization and education reduce birth rate.
Yeah.
And that trend will ultimately happen, I think, throughout the world. So that's why I'm, encouraging people, let's at least maintain our numbers, we don't need to expand in a crazy way, but it's at least maintain our numbers, maybe a little bit of growth.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think so many people think the opposite? You hear a lot of talk about I think the whole overpopulation thing
is total rubbish.
I think it's a massive psyop, and
that's not true.
Yeah, but why do so many otherwise smart people buy into that?
Well, I think to some degree this is a side effect of the environmental movement.
Okay,
so the sort of environmental movement, I think, started off well, where it was saying, look, we need to move to sustainable energy, which is correct in the long term. We do need to move to sustainable energy. It's tautological. If we don't move to sustainable energy, then it's unsustainable and we'll run out and civilization will grind to a halt. So we do need to have sustainable energy over time. There's obviously a concern with climate change. Although I'm of the opinion that while there is a long-term concern for climate change, there is not really much of a short-term concern. It's a very slow process, and I think we don't need to sort of be stopping people from farming or having cows or whatever. This is crazy. This is and that's like small potatoes from an environmental standpoint. The fundamental thing from an environmental standpoint is if you've got billions of tons of fossil fuels, essentially, carbon in liquid and gaseous form or solid form in the case of coal, that's buried deep underground, and you move it from deep underground into the atmosphere and the oceans, you obviously change the chemistry of the oceans and atmosphere.
Mm.
And if you keep doing that for a long time, we'll eventually change the chemistry enough that there will indeed be climate change. But Earth is very big, and humans are small.
Mm.
Tim Urban, I calculated that you could fit all the humans on Earth on one floor in the city of New York.
On one floor?
On one floor, yes. Now, you're kind of wedged in there, but,
yeah. Oh, okay. So if you just kind of spread them throughout the city. Okay,
shoulder to shoulder, whatever.
Okay.
It's basically the cross-sectional area of humans is small. We think that there are a lot of people, and that's, if you live in London or New York, you'd be like, oh wow, there's a lot of people. But that's a very rare situation.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, if you're flying, across the U.S. or internationally, it's empty.
It's empty.
Yeah, you fly from LA to New York. Most of the time, there's you don't see anyone.
No.
So, if you're trying to drop a ball on somebody's head while flying from LA to New York, you'd have a real hard time. You're going to miss. It's just not a, we humans are not densely packed. They're, plenty of room for more people. That's basically the situation. So anyway, I think the environmental movement kind of got somewhat overzealous and kind of was, and in the limit of environmentalism, you sought to conclude that humanity is a plague on Earth, that humanity is actually the problem.
That's a big one.
Yeah. And that's obviously taking the environmental movement just too far.
Mm-hmm.
But there are literally people who believe this. They're extinctionists.
Yes.
The New York Times, some months ago, had an article, front page article with some guy who, and his quote was, there are 8 billion people on Earth, and it would be better if there were none.
That's dark.
Yeah,
It's
I'm like,
dark.
hey, buddy, you can start with yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, no,
if you really want to, make a difference, how about take your own advice here? But that's like a crazy viewpoint. That's like literally saying let's genocide humanity. I'm like, what? How can you say that with a straight face? That sounds like total madness. But people, like I said, in the limit of environmentalism, it sort of becomes like an ingrown toenail. It's sort of like, yeah, toenail's fine, but not if it's like warped and ingrown. It's just gone too far. Humanity is not a blight on the face of the earth, and frankly, even with climate change, life on Earth will still continue. The calamities that Earth has suffered, where life continued afterwards, like gigantic meteorite impacts, super volcanoes, the continents drifting all over the place. There have been times in Earth's past where it's been like a total snowball, or it's been absolutely sweltering hot. And life, we had many extinction events, but but life continued. We don't see the dinosaurs now, but they've had a good run for 100+ million years. So even if there's catastrophic climate change on Earth, life continues. It just may not be the life as we know it. It may not be humans. It'll be something else. So what we're talking about with climate change is not a threat to all life on Earth, but really maybe a threat to humans or a dislocation of humans if there's low-lying countries that the water level rises and now they're underwater type of thing. So I think one just needs to strike the right balance by saying, like, look, over time we need to move to a sustainable energy economy, and we can't just keep taking billions of tons of carbon from deep underground and putting it in the atmosphere and expect nothing will happen forever.
Yeah.
But we also don't need to be alarmist about it and super negative and massively disrupt people's lifestyles. I think people can continue to live a normal life.
Yes.
And they shouldn't be guilty about being human or sort of, frankly, having a stake. It's fine.
Yeah, it all, something that strikes me with that agenda as well, and people who push it, is it also seems like Western countries climbing the ladder and then pulling the ladder up after them, right? So when you have large developing nations, somewhere like India, lots of parts of Africa and so on, and it's like, okay, the Western nations have gone through this whole process to even get to a stage where you can afford to care about such things. You've got other nations that are developing and they're trying to get up to the level of prosperity that, say, the USA has right now. And you want them to care about the environment, but it's like people are still poor. People are not going to care about the environment until they've got their basic needs met. So there's a part of it where it's this, it's this sort of belief system that I think is very, what's the right term? It's almost like to use a Rob Henderson term, it's like a luxury belief, right? It's like, okay, it's all good for you to view things that way, but if you think about the average person in many parts of the developing world, they can't afford to be thinking this way. They still need to get up to at least the basic level that our countries are in.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with what you just said, but I also think that the cost of sustainable energy has been dropping tremendously, and you're seeing a lot more wind and solar, and pair that with the battery, and you've got continuous power from wind and solar. That's actually very competitive, so cost competitive. Actually, one of the nice things about, say, solar battery is you don't need to run high power lines all over the place. You can have some localized solar battery situation on your house or factory building, or you can kind of decentralize the power generation. And I think that's actually better for people to have decentralized power generation, and also decentralized communications. Like a lot of places, they skipped all the sort of phone landline stuff and went to cell phones.
Yes.
In fact, a lot of places in the world have way better cell connectivity than Silicon Valley, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
So yeah.
When it comes to the idea of underpopulation, what is your biggest concern about that? If there are not, you've said many times publicly that we need more people, we need more human beings.
Yeah.
What would happen if, this is not my perspective, but for the people who are there who do think, who do have this sort of Malthusian worldview, and they think that there's too many people and there aren't enough resources.
Obviously.
And he's been wrong for a very long time, but kind of like
still comes back.
Communism, it won't go away.
Exactly. There we go again.
So what's the greatest fear there? If people are not reproducing as they have been for most of human history, what's the greatest concern there?
Well, I think it's like what we risk is a civilizational collapse.
Yeah.
So. And somewhat of a depressing civilizational collapse. If the birth rate keeps dropping every year and population just keeps going into the sort of like negative death spiral, literally, then it won't die with a bang. It'll die with a whimper in adult diapers. I mean, that's a bleak end to civilization. So, I keep looking at the birth rate numbers, which are just like available online. It's not like it's basic facts, and hoping that the birth rates will turn around, and every year it gets worse.
Yeah. What do you think could practically be done to help with that? Because a big factor in this is, I talk to a lot of young men and young women. I'm in my own position as well.
Yeah, you should have some kids.
So I plan to. I will.
Yeah.
But due to, from everything from social and cultural factors, economic factors, financial factors, a lot of young men and women, say the average 20-year-old or even 25-year-old, they find the whole idea of having children, bringing new life into the world, very scary because they feel like, hey, I don't have the money, I can't afford it, I can't even buy a house, I'm in debt, I'm struggling to keep my head above water, so on. So what do you think could practically be done in USA, Canada, UK, Europe, all these developed countries, South Korea, Japan, all these places where the, population is declining, birth rates are declining? I think it's one thing to recognize the issue, but what do you think can be done on a sort of practical, reasonable level?
Well, I do think that like some of the incentive structure in a lot of countries is against having kids.
Yes.
Like it's sort of it is expensive to have kids, especially if you want to sort of give them the best education and all that sort of stuff. So it's it is financially difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but I say that, but then ironically, the higher someone's income,
fewer kids.
Yeah. So it doesn't totally make sense that you have an inverse correlation with income and kids. Where so I guess people may sort of think that, but it's not actually real. I think that the fears, there's these unjustified fears of like, well, if I have a kid, things are going to be financially terrible, and it's actually not true. It's just, I don't know that I have a good answer to this because I'm trying to figure it out.
I mean, I know that for a lot of young people, and some of this is media and cultural programming, but a lot of people have been pushed over the decades the idea that having children ruins your life. Right? That it takes away your freedom and your autonomy, and you can't have fun and do all this cool stuff, and you've got to just, I think the idea of parenthood, I think the solution is, I don't know exactly how to do this, but I think the idea of parenthood and family needs to be made cool.
Yeah, it does.
It needs to be made cool again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people just don't understand, like, nothing will make you happier than having kids. It will absolutely improve your happiness level to have kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we're kind of like programmed for that. It's like, if we just say like in the old days where it's like, people were sort of like food was like short supply, they had plague, like, it's like trying to survive from one year to the next in the old days was like a big deal. And so, now we have, now that's kind of more or less normal that you would survive from one year to the next. So, we've become, I guess, complacent, but basically, if it wasn't rewarding instinctively to have kids, we wouldn't have them.
Yes.
Almost none of the world was literate until not that long ago. So it's not like you'd like, oh, let me read a bunch of books. You kind of have to instinctively love having kids. Yeah. Otherwise, you can't read about it. And it's like, it's just don't read books.
Yeah.
So I think that's important to understand. You will absolutely be happier if you have kids. Absolutely. We're literally, we've evolved to have that, as all creatures have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can take, say, like, I don't know, like an alley cat or something, or a bobcat, like some like wild creature that would normally be quite fierce and unfriendly, and like kill or eat anything it came across. But the moment it has, cubs or puppies or whatever, or kittens, it becomes that becomes a loving mom.
Mm-hmm.
So like the cat that was really mean is like taking care of its little kittens. It's instinct. It's like, it's genetic programming. So people should really expect that if they have kids, they will improve their quality of life, not make it worse.
If you haven't heard already, it's Smooth Sack Summer. That's right. This is the summer to keep your man parts cool while still looking hot with Manscaped. And you can jump right in and get 20% off plus free shipping with the code ZUBI at manscaped.com. The leaders in below-the-waist grooming are making sure we all have a ball this summer by giving us everything we need to stay fresh downstairs. The Manscaped Performance Package 4.0 has everything you need to prepare that summer bod. Their Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents, thanks to their advanced skin-safe technology. It's even waterproof, so you can groom yourself in the shower if that's how you roll. The package also includes their Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Manscaped boxers, and the Shed travel bag. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code ZUBI at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code ZUBY, Z-U-B-Y, at manscaped.com. It's Smooth Sack Summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind.
You've got a lot of kids?
Yeah, I'm trying to set a good example.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How has having kids made your life better? How does it make you happier? And how does it motivate and drive the things that you're doing?
Well, I don't know. It's like, I think it's normal to love your kids. It's just kind of an automatic thing. And they've got this little creature that's depending on you to take care of it. And it's very rewarding to do so, I think, inherently. They're a lot of fun. But I don't know. You love them. They love you. It's great.
Do you find being a father is a driver? Is that a particular driver and motivator for the way you think and the things that you're not trying to do, the things you are doing?
I think it does motivate me to, want to make sure that the future is going to be good for my kids, and sometimes people might say like, well, so sometimes I'm complimented and they will say like, well, it's very magnanimous of you or altruistic of you to care about civilization. But I think actually, like, even if somebody's very selfish, you should still care about civilization because we cannot live in the absence of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot live alone. We cannot, if you want to know what being alone and without civilization is, just look at like Naked and Afraid, It's not, they don't want to, it's not, we all like actually hanging out with other humans. We all actually like each other more than we think. In reality. One of my sons, Saxon, who's sort of autistic, but he's kind of awesome. He's like an oracle of wisdom. He for a long time, he was I'd try to have like a family dinner at a restaurant once a week, just go out somewhere. And Saxon for a long time didn't understand why we were doing this. He's like, why are we going out? And And then finally he had an epiphany and said, oh, the reason people go to restaurants is to hang out with strangers. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually true.
Yeah.
Because you can get the same restaurant food delivered. You can call your friends over.
Yeah.
But you know what you can't get unless you go to a restaurant is hanging out with strangers. So we actually like hanging out with strangers.
Wait until he discovers nightclubs.
Yeah, exactly. Like nightclubs. You go to a nightclub, you're like,
a dark room with loud music.
You can barely see anyone. It's music's loud, but it's still kind of fun. And you're just with a bunch of strangers, basically. Humans actually do love other humans more than they may think they do. And you look at, like, say, what's like one of the worst punishments in prison is solitary confinement. And it's not like, if you're not in solitary confinement, the rest of the prisoners maybe not like the most awesome group to hang out with, but it's way better than being alone.
Yeah, you're probably safer in there, but
yeah,
you don't want to be there.
So humans love other humans more than they realize.
Yeah. I've listened to a lot of your interviews, and a lot of stuff is about the sort of here and now. But I'm curious to know a little bit more about your journey. People see all the things that you're doing now with Tesla and putting rockets in space and buying Twitter and restoring free speech, trying to make humanity an interplanetary species. But tell me more. I went to South Africa for the first time just a few months ago. So I went to Johannesburg. I went to Cape Town. I know that's where you grew up and you spent your childhood.
Mostly in Johannesburg and Pretoria, and for a couple of years in Durban. Okay. I visited Cape Town a few times, but didn't live there.
Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit more about the pre-super multiple CEO Elon Musk? Ultra.
I had kind of like I wouldn't say, I really mostly sad and unhappy childhood, actually. It wasn't 100% bad, but it was pretty rough. And I lived in South Africa until I was 17. And then I was able to get Canadian citizenship through my mom.